Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we begin the second hadith from the 40th hadith of Imam Nawawi. Now, before we actually begin, let's give some background history of this particular hadith. This hadith is known as the Hadith of Jabril. It is also known as Sunnah. Now, the reason why it's called the Hadith of Jabril is pretty self-explanatory. However, the reason why it's called Sunnah is because if you look at the hadith as a whole, you will find that the hadith talks about all the tenets of Islam. It goes over the 5 pillars of Islam, the 6 components of faith, the signs of the Day of Judgement, as well as the hereafter. This is why the scholars of the past and the contemporary scholars of today have called this hadith Sunnah. Sunnah. Now, as we previously said in the first video, we will begin each video by going over the Arabic grammar and then going over any fiqh principles, and then lastly talking about the aqidah in the hadith. So this hadith, we have 3 vocabulary words. So if you look at your screen, you will see the first vocabulary word is ka'anna. Ka'anna. Please say it with me. كأن. An example of this will be كأنك أخوه. كأنك أخوه. It is as if you are his brother. كأنك أخوه. The second vocabulary word is السائل. السائل. Now, we're going to do a little exercise here. This exercise is, I want you to think of any 3-letter verb in Arabic. I'll give you a few. ذهب, جلس, وقف. The reason why I'm giving you these 3 verbs is because we're going to do something here. You can take any 3-letter verb, okay, and we're going to make what is called fa'il, the doer of that verb. If you look at as-sa'il, it comes from the word sa'ala. When you have any 3-letter verb and you want to make the doer of that verb, what you're going to do is you're going to put it on the scale of fa'il. So, any 3-letter verb, all you're going to do is add an alif after it, and then the second to the last letter, what are you going to do is add a kasra. So, let's go back to those 3 verbs. We said ذهب. How would you say he is going if he's a doer of the action? You would say ذاهب. ذاهب. Okay? Now, the second verb we chose was جلس. You would say جالس. جالس. The third letter that we chose was وقف, which means he stood. So, the doer of the verb will be waqif. Waqif. So once again, you take any 3-letter verb from here on out, any 3-letter verb that you want to practice with. We said if you want to make the doer of that action, all you have to do is after the first letter, add an alif, and then second to the last letter, add a kasra. Try it out, inshallah ta'ala. So, if you look at your screen now, the third word that we're going to use is rabba. Rabba. Rabba means someone who cultivates. Now, notice that this resembles or looks similar to the word rabb. Rabb. Okay, so now that we actually covered some of the Arabic grammar and the vocabulary within the hadith, there's something very, very important that we need to talk about before we go on to any fiqh principles or even aqidah. Notice in the beginning we said that this hadith is the hadith of Jabril. Now, who is Jabril? Jabril alayhi salam is the angel that's in charge of revelation. Now, because we're on the topic of revelation, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he mentions that there are 5 types of revelation. And this is very important. So if you look at your screen right now, we're going to go over the 5 types of revelation. So the first type of revelation is what's commonly known as a vision. A vision was the first stage of divine revelation to be experienced by the Prophet ﷺ. Any vision that he had would take place the next day as clear as daybreak. The Prophet ﷺ said, visions of the prophets are revelation. The second type of revelation is inspiration. This is what the angel will place into the heart of the Prophet ﷺ without being seen. It is narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said, the Holy Spirit, Jabril, has inspired me that no soul will die until it has completed its appointed term and received its provisions in full. So fear Allah and seek provisions moderately. The third type of revelation is an angel coming in the form of a man. The best example of this is this particular hadith, the hadith of Jabril. The fourth type of revelation is the sounding of a bell. This was the hardest form of all the revelations to be received by the Prophet ﷺ. Aisha radiallahu anha said that the Prophet ﷺ was asked how the revelation would come to him. The Prophet ﷺ replied, sometimes it's like the ringing of a bell, and this is the most difficult. Another form of revelation that was experienced by the Prophet ﷺ is direct revelation without intermediaries. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet ﷺ without the intermediary of an angel, like he spoke to Moses. A prime example of this will be the hadith of Isra. Now, for those of you who do not know what Isra or Mi'raj is, this is the night where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed the Prophet ﷺ to go from Mecca to Jerusalem and up to the heavens and then back to Mecca all in one night. This is the hadith of Isra. Now that we actually went over the types of revelation, let's begin some fiqh principles that we can take from the hadith. Within the hadith, we find that Jabril alayhi salam asked the Prophet ﷺ, "Akhbirni anil Islam," inform me about Islam. From the things that's mentioned, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that a person needs to make hajj, in istata'ta ilayhi sabila, that as long as you are capable of doing so. Being that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that you are obligated to make hajj if you have the capability of doing so, then it's important that we need to talk about what is capability. What makes a person capable of making hajj? Now, the scholars have mentioned a few things. You have the capability that is connected to money, and then you have capability that is connected to health, and then you have capability that is connected to transportation. So let's talk about the first capability. If we're just talking about money, let's give a prime example. Let's say hajj is about $7,000 or $8,000. A person only has $7,000 to $8,000 in their bank account. It covers the transportation and it covers all the fees of hajj, but they have nothing else left in their savings. Is this person capable? Some of the scholars have mentioned, no, he's not. Now the reason being is because if he takes that money to go make hajj, in reality he's harming his family in the end. his family may get evicted, or his family will not have food to eat. Now, I know to some people this may sound a little bit extreme, but this isn't a reality. Sometimes we want to make Hajj so bad that we'll take the money, however, but we will cause harm in the end to our families. So this is the capability that's connected to wealth. If a person does not have extra money to take care of his needs of his family while he's gone, then we say he is not capable of making Hajj. The second thing we spoke about in regards to capability is health. Now, the reason why this is important is because when a person goes out to make Hajj, they should have the physical capability to perform the rites of Hajj. The rites of Hajj. Now, we're not talking about someone who needs assistance. For example, they may need help with a wheelchair. We're not talking about this particular individual. However, a person may be paralyzed, but he has the money to make Hajj. Is he held accountable? The scholars mention no. This person is not held accountable to make Hajj because he does not fulfill the conditions of istita'a, which is the capability, as we mentioned, of wealth, of health, and transportation. Okay, so this particular person who is paralyzed, he may have the wealth to do so, but because he does not has the physical capability of performing all the rites of Hajj, then we say that the obligation of Hajj is lifted from this individual and they are not held accountable with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third thing we talked about in regards to istita'a, capability, is transportation. Transportation. And this basically is a safe way to get there and to return. Within the hadith, Jabril goes on to say, Akhbirni an al-iman, inform me about faith. Now this is commonly known as the 6 components of faith. From the 6 components of faith, it is to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to believe in His angels, to believe in His books, to believe in His messengers, to believe in the Day of Judgment, and as well as predestination. So when we talk about the belief of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it has 4 main things that every Muslim needs to have to complete his or her belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first thing that we need to have is to believe in the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we have to believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. The second thing is to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's lordship. Now, this means that a Muslim believes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of everything, that He's the king of all kings. When we talk about believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we also believe in His worship. This means that we believe that there is no one other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala worthy of worship except for Him. And then lastly, to complete our belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we must believe in His names and attributes. And that is, when we talk about the names and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we only affirm that which Allah and His Messenger has affirmed. And we don't rely on our own intellect to try to use names that we think are suitable for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For an example, if we go back to the Arabic vocabulary of this hadith and we find the word rabba, which means to cultivate. So a person says, you know what, rabba, it means to cultivate. Cultivating someone is similar to like a parent, a mother or a father. So you know what, I'm going to say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is my father based upon this. Then we say no, that is rejected, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not affirm this name for Himself, nor did His Messenger affirm this name for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we talk about the belief in the angels, there are four main beliefs that every person needs to have to complete their belief in the angels. The first belief is we have to believe that they exist. When we talk about the names specifically and generally, what I mean by that is that we know some names of the angels. However, we don't know all the names of all the angels. Therefore, we affirm the names that we know, such as Jabril or Gabriel in English, Mikael, Israfil, Malik. Another belief that is necessary to complete the belief in the angels is the attributes. Now, what do we mean by that? The attributes, for an example, we know that has been affirmed from the Quran and the Sunnah. We know that has been affirmed by the Sunnah that Jabril has 600 wings. So we affirm this by saying we know that Jabril has 600 wings. We also know that the angels that hold the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the distance between the earlobes and the shoulders, as some hadith mention, is a distance of a bird in flight for 7 to 70 years. Another belief that is necessary to complete the belief in the angels is occupations. Now, what do we mean by occupations? Well, we know that Jabril alayhi salam is in charge of revelation. We also know that Mikael is in charge of the rain. We know that Israfil is in charge of blowing the trumpet. Third component from the 6 components of faith are books. Now, when we say books, we're talking about the heavenly books. First main belief that we must have is that we have to believe that these books are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's go over some of the names that we know from the books. We know the Quran, we know the Torah, we know the Injil, we know the Zabur. Another main belief that we have to complete our faith in the heavenly divine scriptures is revelation. Now, when I say revelation, what I mean is that we have to believe that these books have been revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to believe that these books have been revealed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The last main belief that we have to complete our faith in the heavenly divine scriptures is that we have to try to apply these scriptures to our daily life. The first main belief that we have to complete our faith in the messengers is that we have to believe that their message is the truth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second one is that we have to believe in the names of the messengers, specifically and generally. What we mean, once again, we say specifically and generally, is we affirm the names of the messengers that we know and the ones that we don't know. We believe in them in a general sense. The third main belief that we have to complete our faith in the messengers is belief in what is authentically reported. Now, what do we mean when we say authentically reported? Unfortunately, when it comes to narrations, we have some narrations that have been falsified. Therefore, we can't say that the Prophet ﷺ, or any prophet for that matter, has mentioned this. So therefore, we say we believe in what has been authentically reported from the messengers. The last belief that we must have to complete our faith in the messengers is abide by the legislation of the messengers. Now, this is very important. This is because, unfortunately, we have some people that feel they have a way that is better than the way of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we tend to follow our desires. We say, well, I think it's better for me to do this or that, and I think this will be more effective than what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught. If that is a person's understanding, then we say they have not completed their faith in the messengers correctly. Because for sure, the message of the messengers has come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, it is as if the person is saying that their way is better than the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next component from the 6 components of faith is the belief in the Day of Judgment. Now, to complete our belief in the Day of Judgment, there are 3 main beliefs that we have to complete that belief. The first one is resurrection. The second belief that is mandatory that a person has to complete their faith in the Day of Judgment is accountability, that a person will be held accountable. The third belief that is mandatory that we have to complete our faith in the Day of Judgment is to believe in a paradise and in a hell, and that these places are present as of right now. The next component from the 6 components of faith is predestination. In Arabic, we express this by saying qadar. Now, there are 4 main beliefs when we talk about predestination. The first main belief is knowledge. Before anything happens, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had knowledge of it. The main belief that we must have when we talk about predestination is that this has been written. Before the creations of the heaven and the earth, this has already been written for us. The third main belief that we must have when we talk about predestination is that no matter what happens, it is the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He has allowed it to happen. And the last main belief that we must have when we talk about predestination is existence. Now, what does that mean? We say that before anything happens, it must go past these particular 4 stages. In Arabic, this is expressed by saying maratib al-qadr. Maratib al-qadr, the stages of predestination. That first, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has knowledge of it, as well as written down with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He allowed it to happen, whether it be good or bad. And then lastly, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it, He will allow it to come into existence.